Hello there. Welcome to this episode of Force Ghost Conversations. This is your host, Anthony King, and this week I am joined by Jimmy, co host of the Explore the Force podcast, to discuss episode 3 from the Acolyte titled Destiny. If you're a fan of the podcast and would like to consider pledging your support, there will be a link in the episode description for you to check out the various tiers offered. Also, please be sure to check out our TeePublic store to buy some Force Ghost Conversations merchandise. And without further ado, it's time to gather around the campfire for some Force Ghost Conversations. All right, everybody, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And boy, is this a wonderful episode of both the Acolyte and podcast conversation that we have coming your way. Yes, we have Jimmy from Explore the Force to discuss all things Acolyte in the episode specifically titled Destiny, Part 3, or Episode 3, if you will, from the series, which goes deeper into the world of witches, mystery, magic, all of the things that accompany that. Which I think is will be. I know what the conversation is, so I can tell you it's going to be a really fruitful, honest, and a in-depth look at this episode and what it means for the larger Star Wars galaxy and universe. So I think you're going to have a wonderful time listening to it, and not being totally biased on this one, or I am perhaps being really biased on this one. I think you're going to enjoy it a lot. So stay tuned for that. Before we get into the main conversation, I do want to touch upon some news that took place in the Star Wars and Lucasfilm galaxy this past week in our appropriately dubbed segment, Cloud City Gossip. Now, to start, in conjunction or collaboration, I should say, rather, for episode 3 of the Acolyte Destiny, a new song has been released by pop artist Victoria Monet titled Power of Two, which you can listen on your streaming platforms now. I will say I'm not the biggest fan of pop music or R&B, hip hop, anything like that, but this is actually a pretty decent song, I'll say. It's only like 3 minutes long. It's a quick and easy listen to. I think if you enjoyed the episode, you'll probably enjoy what this song is kind of putting down, if you know what I mean. So go check that out on your streaming platforms now or on YouTube. Probably any place that music is available, you can find it in some way, shape, or form. Additionally, Temptation of the Force, the next novel in the High Republic stories, right? The books that predate we see the events of in the Acolyte by a couple hundred years, or 100 years at least, is now out. So I have my copy. I can't wait to take a deep dive into that one as I read through it here. And I hope that you all have been keeping up, or at least started the High Republic stories now that the Acolyte is out, and it takes place in that world. Additionally, speaking of High Republic stuff, Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures is coming back for a second season. Nubs Nation, rejoice! August 14th on Disney Junior, I believe, as well as Disney Plus. We'll see a new batch of episodes come out, and I've watched a good handful of episodes. I've enjoyed it a lot so far, and I think we'll do some conversations about what those episodes entail once I have more time to devote to that. Aside from Acolyte and other things that are going on in my life, once things slow down a little bit on that front, I think we'll do some Young Jedi Adventures conversations. So stay tuned, I should say, for that one. And finally, for our Rebel Moon fans, Zack Snyder has announced that Chapter 1, the director's cuts, or Chapters 1 and 2 of the director's cuts, I should say, of both films, are titled different things as well. So Rebel Moon Chapter 1, Chalice of Blood, and Chapter 2, Curse of Forgiveness, will debut on Netflix on August 2nd. So if you've been waiting to see the director's cuts of those films, the longer versions, which are actually different movies in many ways, in terms of plot points, scene, construction, dialogue, action sequences, they're not one-to-one films with just longer sequences. No. Based off of what I've read in interviews, as well as the novelization that is depictive of the longer director's cuts versions of the movies, vastly different in terms of experience in many ways. So be on the lookout for that on Netflix coming in August. And of course, we will talk about Rebel Moon Part 2 very soon, and we'll talk about the director's cuts in due time as well. So be on the lookout for that as we get closer to August then, and get hyped as well, because I imagine we'll get some more promotional material as we get closer to their release. So that is all that we had for Cloud City Gossip this week, folks. We'll be back on the other side of this very short break with our conversation with Jimmy about the Acolyte Episode 3, Destiny. Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Force Ghost Conversations. And boy, do we have a really, I will say, a really interesting, and I will say for myself, an excellent episode of The Acolyte this week. We had episode 3 titled Destiny, and I know this one has been sparking tons of conversations online. I've seen positive conversations, bad conversations, but we're here to have a very thoughtful conversation about this episode, to break it down, discuss the important themes and details of this, and just really chat about the nitty-gritty of this episode to begin with. And of course, to break it down, I have brought along my friend and co-host of the Explore the Force podcast, Jimmy. Welcome to Force Ghost Conversations, and how are you doing?
Oh man, I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I'm loving the Acolyte. I'm, one of the few people, it seems like, on the internet that actually appreciates the Acolyte for what it is. But yeah, things are great. I'm loving new Star Wars. So, and I love it, man. Just more.
I agree with you there. I like what you said as well, where you're like, we got new Star Wars. This is a time to celebrate, not to just automatically just come out and hate stuff and review bomb something just because, a woman's behind it, or female characters and people of color and diverse characters are at the forefront of things. We lived in a dark time, right? The 90s, where the late 80s, the 90s, where there was no Star Wars. And now we have this influx of new Star Wars content that we get almost every 3 months. There's a new Star Wars thing, book, show, movie, TV show, something like that. And I think you and I are taking the same approach here, where it's automatically like, great, let's see what it is first before making an opinion on it.
Yeah, that's the thing for me, and a lot of conversations I've had online trying not to go to the dark side. But my advice to people is just let it play out. If you have questions and you don't understand something, like, let's watch all eight episodes, and then let's come back and review it, and we'll see what's up. I know there's rumors already about a season 2, so they got stuff planned. I mean, this is storytelling. Like, it's not a movie. It's got to develop. People need to relax a little bit. I think that episode 3 has gotten people all fired up. And I feel like, she's even come out and said, Leslie Headland's even come out and said, this is one point of view. You could tell by the titles. This is the first one to only have one word title. Yeah. All Osha's view, probably, we're assuming. But again, we don't know. I'm just on the positive side of assuming. So, but yeah, we'll see.
Here to what you just said, my friend. Like, we haven't seen the full picture yet. We have just been giving one point of view here. And to jump to conclusions right away after 3 episodes of this, when there's a lot more to be told here, it's a little premature at this point to be making blanket judgments like worst thing ever, worst Star Wars ever. How is this Star Wars? You don't even know how it's Star Wars yet at this point. We're just reacting to just what we see on screen, but knowing there's more down the pipeline, which is, in my opinion, an exciting thing, because I think you and I can see we got one point of view here. There's obviously going to be others that have perspectives on this. And as Obi once said, a lot of the truths we cling to will depend largely on our point of view, yes, which absolutely. To all of us long-time Star Wars fans will know. It's hard to make a quick, rash judgment on something. So we're taking the Jedi approach to this here. We're reviewing and analyzing, discussing what was presented in front of us.
But we're not stealing your kids, so don't worry about it.
We'll get to that one. The Jedi are... That's a Jedi point of view, I'll tell you that. And then from the other point of view, I can see, like, this is fascinating. I love the idea of perspectives on this. And the show has already done an amazing job when it gets to that. But before we get into The Acolyte, episode 3, Destiny, Jimmy, we're in the High Republic for light and life.
Absolutely.
I want to... A lot of this, it's set in this era, but it's really an era that has been predated, the show at least, by a lot of books. And we're now getting a second season of the Young Jedi Adventures. So, I want to know about your experiences first. How familiar are you with this era already, right? Have you been keeping up with the books? Maybe have you watched a couple episodes of the Young Jedi Adventures? Tell us about your journey so far with the High Republic.
Yeah, I've been in from day one. I was at Celebration Chicago when
Okay.
they announced Project Luminous, and everyone's like, "Yay!"
What is
Like
this?
no one had any idea. They're like, "Oh, it's just going to be this, books and comics. It's not going to be movies." And then we got to Anaheim a few years later after COVID, and the I had a really bad time in Anaheim personally, as far as like getting into like different venues and stuff. But I got into
Yeah.
all the High Republic, all the publishing stuff. So I was like, I'm going to go do it. Like I'm here. I want to hear what's coming. They were kind of full, not that full. But by the time we got to London, man, that place was rocking, and
Oh yeah.
it was awesome to see the transition. I have been in since day one. I've read everything that's been out: comics, young adults, mid grade. Some of the little books I've gotten with, if it has like Buryaga and stuff like that in it.
Oh
I have
man.
been in it from the beginning, and I've loved it. It's just an era where none of these, there's very few people in these books that are safe, that we know
Yeah.
what happens to them, right? And then those people
Except
are
for
kind of,
Yoda and Yaddle, like
yeah,
those
and
are the only two we
they're
really
kind of
know.
brushed off to the side, except for one book, really. And so I've loved it. I love the story. Marchion Rowe might be up there with some of the all-time great bad guys, depending on how this all ends. But yeah, I've been in it. I've watched some of the Young Jedi Adventures with my nephews. They've really enjoyed it.
Great.
I've often, I was kind of sporadic. I haven't sat down and like dove into it yet, which I need to. Um, but yeah, I absolutely love the High Republic. I love all the Jedi. I love, with Phase 2, ironically, I think sheds a lot of light on the stuff that happened in Episode 3, which we can get into later. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
so as High Republic, I'm in the middle of Temptation of the Force, and I will
Ooh.
say, and I can't say who, but we have a really, really, really big interview coming out on Tuesday from one of the main authors. I will say that much.
Oh.
So we got
Ooh.
our hands, we got some time with somebody, and it was awesome to spend time with them and just kind of talk about it a little bit. So check
Wait.
that out. But yeah, very
That's
cool though.
yeah, this is awesome. You heard it here first on Force Ghost. We have an exclusive for the next episode of Explore the Force. Go check that out. You said on Tuesday that you got
Yeah, it'll
a
come out
big
on
name lined up.
Tuesday, and then I think the YouTube version will come out on Tuesday or Wednesday as well. So it'll
Ooh.
be up. I'm pretty excited for it. It was a lot of fun. This person is instrumental, we'll say, to the High Republic. So it's pretty awesome.
You're saying all the right words here. You know, I'm excited just to find out who it is to begin with here, and
Yeah.
I hope our listeners at home are also going to be tuning in as well, because when you got, it sounds like an architect, let's say in a different word,
Yes, I
of
will say it's one of the founding
the
members.
founding members. Oh my
Yes.
gosh! Wow, we're
So
talking the Mount Rushmore of
yes,
of
we're pretty excited for it. So
High Republic authors and creators here. So
yeah.
this is an inside scoop here, perhaps, for what's coming next on that, which is pretty exciting. And I'm glad to hear that Temptation of the Force has already been opened by
Oh
you.
yeah, I
I
love it
have it
so
right here
far.
beside me, and it's I have to finish one book first before getting to that. Keep myself accountable.
Oh yeah.
But I am at the same point that you are, which is read everything up to this point. I will say, technically not everything. I have the Buryaga book, the
The little,
showdown at the fair
yeah.
with.
There's
I
nothing
didn't.
to it. I
Yeah,
just like
there's nothing
looking. Yeah.
revelatory in those, I imagined, and I was like,
No.
I'll save my $5. I'll
Yeah.
put that towards the next thing. But even I got the Tales of Enlightenment. I just finished Tales of Enlightenment last night. The stories that were in the uh, Star Wars Insider. That was excellent.
Yeah.
Shout out to George Mann for putting together some great
He
short
has
stories there.
crushed it, man. Opening up Phase 3 the way he did with the
But
Eye
I'll
of
tell you,
Darkness just set the tone.
you are speaking my language, my friend, because Eye of Darkness, not only is it my favorite Star Wars book, but that might be one of the top 5 books I've read of my lifetime at this point. If that's the best phrase I can give to any
Awesome.
book at this point. I mean, that from page 1, it grips you. Like,
Oh yeah, for sure. Like
it
it
is
was a
a
great
gut
start.
punch in the best way possible. And then you're on this wonderful roller coaster as you're determining, like, what is a year after a certain thing happens in the High Republic if you haven't read
Mhm.
Phase 1.
Yeah, we'll keep it
Didn't
spoil
want
it
to
too
spoil
quickly.
everybody on that one yet, if in case you haven't, because maybe you're watching the Acolyte and it's inspired you to maybe pick up Light of the Jedi or some other story as an entryway in the High Republic, which I think you and I would both agree has been a fantastic publishing initiative. And it seems like it
Oh,
was destiny for you because Anaheim, Chicago, you heard about it in Chicago. Anaheim, you were forced to, in many ways, that it was the only thing you could see. So fate, again, destiny led you a certain way. The thread of destiny pushed you in this direction, and now it was at the forefront again at in London there, where not only was this the Acolyte showcased a bit more, but they were, if you were perhaps maybe you were in the room where
hmm
they talked a little bit more about Phase Three. And then I believe they showed perhaps the trailer for this too, and then
yeah.
the first
The
look at Vernestra.
So yeah, so on day one they always have like their what's happening, and that was really the focus on that was Indiana Jones 5, really. But they showed this trailer, they showed some Ahsoka stuff, and they didn't really show they showed a snippet. They showed like a little bit of the fight between
Mm-hmm.
Trinity, or I said Trinity, and Dara and May, and
Yeah.
people were, I mean, Jack, he saw it that day, and this was when I was first getting to know Jack, my co-host, and
Mm-hmm.
he was like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen," And then I was kind of bummed. I was like, "Oh, here we go again. I'm not going to get to see anything good." And then I went into the publishing initiative. We got all that. Those authors, man. Like that's one of the best things, and something I talked about with this person was just the camaraderie between them. They seem like they really love each other. And COVID, they told us that really brought them together because like that was
Yeah.
their family during that time, and
Honestly.
just being part of that. So you can see it, you can sense it from them. And of course, they introduce Leslie Headland. She comes out, and then she brings her wife, her partner Rebecca Henderson, I believe,
Yep.
and they just kind of talk about it a little bit. Then they showed us the clip, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I've other than being a massive Ahsoka fan, I've been just dying for this show, and it has not disappointed. So yeah, it was pretty exciting.
Well, I think to your point too is like why the High Republic rocks as an initiative is because this is such an unknown era, right? Aside from a few handful of characters, which are like less than a handful, frankly, you don't know the deal with any of these characters. Everything is on the table there in terms of their journeys, right? Uh, One person they can die. There are stakes, right? They can die in the next page, right? You never know what's really going to happen to any of these people. They could leave the Jedi Order, right? And this show at this point only has one person from the books, even, and everything is on the table again. Clearly, spoiler alert for everybody that hasn't seen the first two episodes, but even in the first 5 minutes of the show, you're seeing a major Master Jedi character taken out, which is awesome for a fan perspective because everything's on the table again.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, some of the discourse online, people are like, "Well, she's the best." That set a tone. I get it. We all love Carrie Ann Moss. Like she's great in everything. She's
Yeah,
Trinity. She's all these other characters that we love. Um, but you knew she was going to be in flashbacks if you had seen a single one of
it's in the
the
trailers. Yeah,
trailers. It's like just relax. And like you said, it set a tone for this show. Like it's like, all right, if
it's a great
they're
cold open.
if they're
Yeah,
not if they're not so X, Y, and Z characters, and it's still 100 years before the rise of the empire or whatever. So, there's no one that's safe, and I think that amps things up.
exactly, exactly. And not that I want Carrie Ann Moss's character to
Oh
pass, Master
no,
Andara, but the way that she did too, I think was the most Jedi way possible, right? Selfless sacrifice of helping out someone else. Like the dark side will exploit that of the Jedi, right? What May did there, she saw the weakness in the Jedi, right? Caring for others, right? Which I know
mm.
other people have done throughout the years in Star Wars storytelling. But to see it again is always like she could have chosen a selfless choice and then taken out May or defended herself and then got away with right her own self and fought another day. But she saw an unarmed person and shows I'm going to help them, which is that's how I would want to go out if I were a Jedi, right? That's
Yeah, I
true to your
mean
principles at the end of
that's
it all things.
what they're supposed to do. I mean that's their calling is to
Yeah,
protect life, and theirs is default if it has to be. I guess we've seen lots of that in Phase 1 of the High Republic, and it just kind of carries on. And You know, and you could even see May kind of testing her when she throws that girl off the
Yeah.
balcony the
Yeah.
first time. She's like, "All right, I see where you're at. I see what you know." Kind of testing her out, and these are some of the nuances that I think some of these people just aren't giving it a chance and like not willing to see. Like, oh, she's you know, she tests her there, she gets her there. Um, you know, I just yeah, I mean, I it's a bummer. Like I want to see more of that. You know, why wouldn't you? But like you said, sets a tone. We got flashbacks. I'm assuming we're going to see her quite often. You know, I don't think we're done with flashbacks for a little bit. I mean, maybe another episode or two
Yeah.
sprinkled in there. I think, but you know, I mean, we knew she wasn't a main character. I mean, I assumed, I guess, that we knew that. But um, yeah, I mean, I liked it. I love the style of it all.
Hmm.
Everything that kind of wraps around it. So
Yeah. I think I've heard someone on the internet say it's, Kill Bill meets Frozen, and I'm like, yeah, all right, cool, I'll take it.
yeah, I remember hearing that in an interview, and I was like, "Well, that's a crazy combination." And what we've called force foo on Explore the Force, you
Force
know,
foo, I like
yeah.
it. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I love it. It's something a little bit different. It's not the same thing. You know, if it
Hmm.
was the same thing, people would be complaining that it's the same thing. I mean, no, people just aren't going to be happy, I guess. But you
Well,
know,
one
just
way or the
take it.
other, they'll find some way to critique
Yeah,
it.
just take it for what it is. And you know, we're making those noodles. I don't know if you saw that on StarWars.com, but you can. They have a recipe for the noodles
Oh man,
that they were
that's
eating in
awesome.
that shop. So we're going to make those for next Tuesday and have those when we're doing when we're watching episode 4. So I'm pretty excited.
It's funny that in the lead up to this, I know some people got like some like boxes sent by
Hmm.
Lucasfilm, right, with a variety of things. And the thing that stood out to me was like the cup of noodles that, that
Yes.
was in there. Like of
Yeah,
all
that was.
things, what like I got a ton of ramen and all that stuff in my own. How's that going to play into the show? And right there, first scene,
There you
guys
go.
slurping down some noodles. It's
Yeah, it's
like,
pretty awesome.
it's funny how like the things that people, I'm sure someone's probably nitpicked about that. People are always going to find things that they don't like about stuff like that. But I'm like, oh, it's the cool stuff about Star Wars. Or I'm like, hey, I could have that too and feel like I'm living a Star Wars, like blue milk, right? I'm
Yeah,
sure many of us went out into our supermarkets
I've
and got
not been
a.
able to find that yet.
You haven't? No, man.
No, Kansas, man, we're backward. Like it takes some time for things to get here.
I gotta say, if you get a hold of it, it does taste pretty. It's not the same as what you'll get at Galaxy's Edge,
Yeah,
but it is pretty good. Not gonna lie.
I don't know.
Just
I'll
don't
keep
have two
looking.
glasses. Just keep it to one glass at a
Just keep it to
time.
one.
Have your blue milk responsibly.
There you go. Yes. Oh my
um,
goodness.
well, to the listeners at home, we're diving deep into spoilers for the Acolyte, and particularly Episode 3, Destiny. So if you haven't seen it yet, what are you doing? Go pause this episode now. Go watch it on your Disney Plus, and then come right back to this podcast to hear our conversation about it. So you've been forewarned at this point. And now that we have a foundation for where both Jimmy and I are at with the High Republic, let's dive into the Acolyte itself. And we've talked a little bit about some of the prior episode stuff here, but more specifically, I would say they were kind of heavy handed in their hinting at an event that happened with May and Osha's family some 16 years prior. Are you, Jimmy, surprised that we got to see a version of these events so early on in the show? We're talking episode 3. We got immediately this major flashback sequence from a certain point of view.
I don't know if I'm surprised. I like the way they're doing it. I think Leslie Headland, she got to sit down with a bunch of content creators like New Rock Stars and some of those people that are, you know, not spewing hate everywhere. And they sat down and was it Kurosawa's film Rashomon,
Mm-hmm.
something
Yep.
like that, where it's like it's the same story from different points of view. That this was going to be it. It maybe we see another version in 5. So that kind of surprised me that it was like
Yeah.
that's how they're doing it. But I felt like we needed it, especially we're doing like spoilers for all the episodes
Oh,
that
yeah.
we've seen.
Totally.
Okay, so for Master Torben to have done what he's done, you know, it had to be something pretty awful,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and just taking a child away from, which is what the Jedi do. And I know like a certain point of view, whichever side you're on, but I don't know if I was surprised. I think I was surprised more that how they're doing it because I think
Mm-hmm.
for me personally, I think it's either either 4 or 5 is going to be another version of this, like to kind of show us. I would assume it have to be because I wouldn't be happy with a Jedi taking their own life over the events the way we've
Mm,
seen them from what
yeah.
we're all assuming. Again, we're assuming was Osha's point of view, you know.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think they needed it though. I think they needed to set up the story. They needed to give us some background because you got these two twins running around. We don't know a lot about them. I thought the dynamic between the sisters was really cool, but I think we needed it personally, as far as the storyline goes. Like they're building a story, and I think we needed to see this
Mm.
to help drive the story forward. In my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, I like what you're saying here. I will say that I was a little bit surprised personally. I thought maybe they would have drawn this out a little bit longer, especially the way they ended episode 2, showing Kelnaka.
Yeah,
That
that
maybe
was.
they would have transitioned a bit more into that and leaned on that with maybe some more flashbacks. But the fact that the whole episode itself was a look back at this time before, I think it was great to at least get that on the table, at least one vantage point of it. I will say that this show also did a great job of, you know, so far, like it hasn't been like letting the mystery box be the thing that is the thread the entire season, right? There have been other shows where they like all 8 episodes are like, who is this person? Who is this person? Like, where is this person? Like, that's the mystery that binds it together. And that I think hindered some of the storytelling of those shows. Whereas, like, in this first episode, right, we learned that there are twins, right? May and Oshie.
Yeah,
That was a big talking point going into the show was like, are there twins? Is there like a multiple personality kind of thing? Like, what's the deal with that? Um, and I'm glad that they also didn't just keep hinting at an event that happened 16 years ago without like showing us. It's a Chekhov's
yeah,
gun thing, right? Like you keep teasing it, show us actually what's going to happen here. So I'm glad that they had the gusto to show us at least some viewpoint of this. I think I agree it is Osha's viewpoint here, and perhaps we'll see May and perhaps several other viewpoints of this too, because what we saw at the end there's maybe not aligning up with what we've seen so far in the show.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I would agree with that totally. So I think we needed it to move forward. I mean, because episode 3, if it goes and deals with Kaunaka and we still don't know what's happening, I think it would work either way. Storytelling as long as it fits in there. But um, yeah, I really appreciated this third episode.
Yeah,
So
I think it did excellent for showing us this important viewpoint and also introducing us to a variety of new characters and um, just different opinions on the Force and how the Jedi are seen in this era, especially. But just different viewpoints of the Jedi, I think, are always a good way to keep us as fans in check of like, well, what are they the guardians of peace and justice? Like, it's always good to be challenged, I think, as a fan. About our notions of what is and what isn't, right? Because all these things can be true at the same time, right? I think that's the complicated nature of
I
reality.
think
Uh,
that is the biggest problem with society is they can't see that it can be
yeah,
a truth from different points of view.
which
You know,
is wild.
yeah. I mean, y- you sit there and you think about this whole thing is for them going to get those girls, and in the original trilogy, you don't see any of this, right? And then in the prequels, you see Anakin, but you know that that's going to happen. You still don't. You see the young kids, sword, playing with their laser swords and stuff in the temple, and then in the sequels, we don't see any of it. So this is really the first time on live action. Now we've seen it in animation, but animation, I love it. It's great storytelling, but it doesn't hit as hard. And I give the example of Ahsoka's flashbacks
Yeah,
of young Ahsoka on the beach fighting in the Clone Wars was like, I'm like, that girl was like 12 years old out there fighting a war, you know. And I don't know why, as much as I loved Ahsoka, I love Ahsoka, the character, the show. It never hit me until I saw it in live action. I thought it was her name, Adriana Greenblatt or Brett.
yep, yep.
Who played young Ahsoka. She's really kind of blowing up these days, but
She's kind of everywhere.
yeah. But I just thought like that was impactful. So I think maybe seeing it happening more so because we all knew what happened had to happen with Anakin in the prequels.
Hmm.
This is just like the first time we've seen someone say, "No, I don't want my kid to go."
Yeah.
And I think that really has fired some people up. And I mean, I
Mm.
get it. I'm not a
Mm.
parent myself, but I mean, I wouldn't want someone coming in and taking my nephews or something, even for the greater good. I don't think
Yeah, yeah, and they're
so.
a group that don't like the Jedi to begin with. Like it's a different
No, yeah, and I
thing where like I think uh, if I can remember the Ahsoka flashbacks in Clone Wars, right, showcase her village being like really welcoming at the and like it's an honor that in
Hmm.
some groups like it's an honor that the Jedi come and find a Force sensitive among their ranks. Um, Whereas this group was seems like they hinted at being hunted by the Jedi perhaps and other people for their beliefs, and they're like now we're trying to live peacefully away from everybody else and just do our own thing. And now you guys are intruding in our values again. And now you're saying we have a right to test everybody just because we could, if we wanted
Yeah.
to.
I mean,
Uh,
they're
which
the establishment, man, and not everyone's gonna love the establishment. So
in many ways they're the establishment
yeah,
between this and bureaucracy.
yeah.
Everything is it's you know not that we want to be Jedi haters, but these things can also be realistic too. Like um, the, the history of the United States is a prime example, right? We see ourselves as being these like the bastion of peace and the arsenal of democracy, but to another people, right? You're like, what are you doing
Well,
here?
ask the Native Americans how.
No, exactly, yeah.
I mean, we did this to their kids. I mean, we had schools in Pennsylvania that we brought Native Americans kids.
Carlisle School, yep,
Yes, kill the Indian, save the man. It's not a lot. I think some of this hits a little too close to home for people.
yeah.
They don't want to, they don't want to look at things
It's tough to
through a literal
acknowledge
perspective.
faulties
Yeah,
in our own system.
yeah, and you gotta learn that stuff, and you gotta move. You have to learn it, you have to accept it, and then you need to try to fix it.
Yeah,
So
I mean, that's the beginning step is recognizing,
yeah.
understanding, and then you can move forward with it. Um, I hope maybe there's a book out, in those Jedi texts that Ray has,
Hmm.
where it's somewhere someone wrote a footnote of like all the stuff that the Jedi were doing, perhaps, and she can with her new order that she's creating, and we'll hopefully see that in a movie someday down the line. Uh, Taking steps forward to be better than what we were before. It's never too
Yeah.
late to turn back. There's always a possibility for a redemption of some sort, as Star Wars teaches us. Um, but again, these things happen in Star Wars apparently too, and it just again showcases that not even the Jedi are the ultimate infallible beings that we were once taught to believe. But who are we hearing these stories from? Like, who's the narrator telling us these stories? Is another thing to think about, right? Obi-Wan is telling Luke. That's the perspective we're hearing. Is him being like looking nostalgically upon a past, and
Mhm.
then also he's trying to convince Luke to follow this journey and to follow this path and to set him on this new hope. Like he sees Luke as this new hope for the galaxy. And if he said, "Well, we also had all these bureaucratic problems that held us back from doing things that we should, and we kind of maybe took some kids here that we, some people didn't look at us favor." Like he's not going to tell them all that stuff. And as an audience, you know, again, both can exist. These are things that are allowed to be realities of the real world and in the world of Star Wars, and it only makes Star Wars, in my opinion, more the richer when it acknowledges that multiple realities and truths can be a thing that exists.
Well, yeah. I mean, have you read The Living Force yet? Have you had a
I have
chance to
not.
read
No,
that? This is
I'm so
all.
looking forward to it. But again, I got a huge
Yeah, I
stack
know.
here.
Yeah, it's tough. But I mean, that whole thing was like a year before the Phantom Menace, and I mean, it's just about all the Jedi Masters, all the Council members, just being
Yeah,
absolutely like slogged with work. They're not even being Jedi. Like the whole premise of that is that for them to get away from the temple for a little bit and go be
indeed.
Jedi again. And so that happens to everybody. It happens in the teaching where we complain about it all the time. When a teacher leaves, become an administrator, you're like, you've forgotten where you've come from, but
Oh my
their
gosh, yes.
problems are brand new when they get to a certain place. And I think the more we study Star Wars, the more, I mean, the Jedi can't be perfect. They're not perfect. They're sentient beings. They're going to make mistakes. They make tons of mistakes. Like
Hmm.
I feel like most of the time they cause more trouble sometimes than they fix. But as we see these things and we see them taking kids and we see them being bureaucratic, how else would this exist? Like, even if they weren't part of the Republic, and in the High Republic, it's been really frustrating for me is that, like, the fact that Vern hid her light whip from everybody
Oh
because
yeah.
she was ashamed of how she was going to be judged by her brothers and sisters in the Jedi Order, and I'm like, that right there tells you they're not infallible.
Hmm.
Like that tells you right there. Even in, people want to argue, well, that's new. Yoda, everyone thought Yoda was crazy when he was hearing the wills. Like, just there's lots of examples of this happening, and the more we dive into Star Wars, the more you get behind the scenes, you look behind the curtain. You're not going to love everything you see.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So, and I think that's honestly is where a lot of some people like us ourselves, we appreciate seeing the inner workings, and we realize like this isn't going to be perfect. This isn't going to, this may not make me happy because I always
Hmm.
wanted to be a Jedi,
Hmm.
and but it makes more sense and it makes it more real.
Yeah.
It
Yep.
makes this
Agreed.
false universe, fake universe. It makes it feel more real because these people aren't, they're not perfect. They make mistakes, you know, and I do hope that Ray's movie, I hope they fix some of these things. I hope they
Yeah.
try to make some changes from where it has been. And here's your opportunity. Let's move forward. Let's look back on what messed up and let's fix it. But if it's anything like the rest, the real world, they probably won't.
Ugh. I have hope. When we have hope, that's the good
Yeah.
part. I'll tell you too. Something that it's 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 not a fault of the creative team. They did an exactly beautiful job in how they crafted it again because the point was to elicit this response from us. But I don't know about you, but in reading phase 2 of the High Republic after knowing what happens in phase 1 and all, spoiler alert again for anybody that hasn't read this, but I'm going into it. Uh
Mhm.
all the nameless that people have seen come face to face with and survive. Like they know that there is this Jedi killing thing out there, and then after the Battle of Dalna, they're like, we should look into that. And no one really does, right? No one picks up that mantle. No one investigates further. They just drop the ball on that, and then they suffer the repercussions another 150 years later with the events that happen in phase 1, and then continue
Yeah.
to happen in phase 3. And you're like, you guys did this to yourself. As a reader, you're just like, I'm pulling
Oh,
my hair out because I'm like,
super.
this is excruciating. That I know that like all these characters that I like in phase 1 die because you guys couldn't get your act together 150 years earlier. And again, you look at the real world examples of this too.
Mhm.
But it hurts again seeing it in a Star Wars lens where you're like, come on, guys, you're right there.
Yeah, and then it's our hero, it's Yoda and Yaddle making these decisions to keep
Oh,
things under
it's
wraps, and it's
crushing
like,
my heart again. Yeah.
why is this the way you did it things? And and then of course the Acolyte opens up and they start talking about their political enemies and things like that.
Oh,
That part I was kind of
oh,
curious about when she says that our political enemies. I'm like, maybe you're you too tied up into politics at the time, but we'll see.
boy. As soon as that happened, I looked right at my wife and was like, "Oh, there it is."
Yeah,
Also,
sure.
I think there were. I wanted to hear your thoughts quickly on this, but like there were like the crawl that wasn't a crawl, right? The little
Mm.
like text slide that they threw up at the beginning, right? They were like, there have been centuries of peace, right? And I was like, did they forget about the war with the Nile?
That's
Really
what.
quickly here, who wrote this? Did the Jedi write this? Did they like revisionist history the last like 200, 300 years, right? Path of the open hand, path of the closed fist, the Nile,
Yeah,
Starlight Beacon. Do they just casually forget all this stuff here? Because I know Vernestra Rowe doesn't forget. I know Yoda and Yaddle are alive for all this.
I mean, because you have Oppo and you have maybe Plo Koon at the time. I mean, well, I guess that's now, but
Maybe
with it,
Buryaga's still
yeah,
around.
yeah, Yariel Poof. I mean, you have some Jedi Masters that are probably around. I wondered that too when I saw that, especially with. I've been impressed. I know lots of stuff surrounding Leslie Headland, whatever, but most of her interviews, she drops some knowledge on some people,
She's
and she
very
knows what she's
confident
talking
about the
about.
High Republic era. Yeah.
Yeah, and just Star Wars in general and the High Republic. She knows her stuff. She knows the material. There's people there to be like, well, it hasn't been. So I kind of wonder if this is another of them brushing something under. I mean, this is the whole galaxy in these books with the Nihil. Like, I mean, so I kind of curious if they're going to touch on that. I mean, we'll see what happens. I think Phase 3 ends in 2025 of the book, so
Hmm.
we'll see
Yep.
if something happens there and they just kind of brush it under the rug, or I mean, this is affecting the whole galaxy. So to say it, but if you look at things where, some of the wars that we fought here, and I hate to keep coming back to history, but we kind of tend to forget things too pretty
Yeah.
quickly. I
Yeah.
mean, ask the people in the Ukraine how things are going. That's old news to us now. Like, oh well, it's not
We're on to
us,
the
so we don't
next
have to
thing.
worry.
Yep.
Yeah, so you can kind of see it, but yeah, I will definitely say that kind of was like, huh? Are you sure?
Yeah, I bet all the people in the exclusion zone really would have loved seeing that they had like, oh, centuries of peace, right?
Yeah. Like what?
We didn't endure Nile occupation whatsoever. The people of Iram and Arano that were in a forever war, like, "Hey,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
we never had any conflicts at all whatsoever, right? And these are just the steps, connecting it to what we will see 100 years later, right? These are the
Yep.
steps that are taken to then have Master Yoda and Mace Windu sit right across from the Sith Lord they've been looking for and not even know.
Oh, yes. There's a part in the Living Force where you want to throw the book.
Oh, really?
You just want to like chuck the book. I mean, it's right at the beginning too. You're like, ah, you just want to throw the book across the
Oh,
room because it's just their,
the
I hate,
hubris.
yeah, it's their hubris.
The
Thank
Sith
you,
have
Luke
been extinct for
Skywalker.
millennia. Where it's impossible for them to have returned. Like, is it really?
Yeah, so for sure.
Wild, wild stuff, man. Well, back to episode 3 here. Ocean and May are a part of this witch coven that it's on Brendock that we see in this episode here. Not only are they witches, but they also seem to utilize the Force in various ways, even calling it something else entirely, the Thread. What do you think of this new witch coven, and how do you think their introduction expands upon the overall lore of Star Wars?
Well, I think for people who haven't read the High Republic, this might have been a shock.
Yeah.
Honestly, it probably was a shock, and online it seems like it was a shock because I've had to have many a discussion, and I'm like, well, look at the comics. You don't even have to read the books. Look at the Phase 2 10 run episode of the
Hmm.
High Republic comic. It's all set on Jeddah. Yes, the city from Rogue One. The planet from Rogue One. Everyone loves that movie. I don't think there's a Star Wars fan out there that doesn't like Rogue One. That
Nope.
city was booming with religions all
Lots of
wrapped around the
religions.
Force,
Yep.
one way or the other. And um, I love this to think that the Jedi, and I don't know, it may have been the High Republic that made me think like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Of course, there's other people because there's going to be people that get missed. They're going to have the Force. They're going to manipulate it. I mean, we had the Night Sisters.
Yes.
Um, this isn't the first time people are acting like it's the first time we've ever seen this. And of course, in the High Republic Phase 2, man, they dive into this. There's at least 7 or 8, maybe 10, I think, that are all part of a council on Jeddah,
Hmm.
and they call it different things. They wield a different. I mean, the path of the open hand doesn't think you should use it at all. Like if you use
Exactly.
it, it messes something else up over here. And I thought it was more of a real world perspective where, I told you off air, I wrote that essay, The Reformation of the
Yeah.
Force. If you're religious and you're not Catholic, if you're Christian and you're not Catholic, you're going through the same thing that's happening on these shows. So I loved it. I thought it was
100%.
great. Different perspective. How they're using it now, we don't know how they're using it, right? To me
Hmm.
personally, I'm like, well, what have they done? Say we worship the Force. I mean, is that what they're doing? Like that
Hmm.
that that part or the thread, I guess it's called. Like that's what
Pull
I
the
want to
thread.
know. Yeah, I want to know more about this. Thread, what they do with it, what's their purpose, like are they just protecting
Hmm.
themselves and they just sit around and they practice, or they said dark and unnatural, there's a reason they were hunted, like there's more to this story, and I hope it gets out. But I loved it. I thought it was great. um and I can understand why people who haven't read anything were upset because this would be quite a shock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, look, I'm not allowing people to not think it's a shock, right? People are allowed to react the way that they do initially, right? I think
civilly.
once you sit with it though, right? And if you want to engage with it, right? You sit with it, you contemplate it. You reflect on it, right? You don't need to go to your Twitter, your Facebook, your Instagrams and start what witches, what are you talking about? But not in my Star Wars, right? Right? Any of that stuff. You're right. You're why it was our hubris as an audience, especially if you don't know anything else, right? You think it's just Jedi and Sith. To think that the Force is only monopolized by those two, right? I say this always. Just because you have the Force doesn't mean you're a Jedi. Just because you have the Force doesn't mean you're a Sith. Those are doctrines, religious doctrines, basically, that people subscribe to, right? They are disciplines, right? To be a Jedi means you follow X code, right? You do these things in these situations. You're trained to use the Force, yes, but it's how you act using the Force in those situations that makes you a quote unquote Jedi, right? You can leave the Jedi Order, right? Osha leaves the Jedi, and Ahsoka leaves the Jedi Order, and a Sith, right? They have different viewpoints on it as well, but they subscribe to a dark side path of things. They use the Force in different ways, perhaps unnatural and dark ways, as Palpatine will later describe it, and in but again, they have a rule of two, right? That's how they do things, right? They subscribe to that discipline and doctrine. The Night Sisters utilize the Force in a different way, and they subscribe to a different doctrine as well, and they're considered witches, right? That's up to them. They call themselves that too, and they're a coven of that sort. And this is another group. I'm sure there are hundreds of thousands of other people that are also right. Balin Skull, no one had a problem with him. He's
My
not a
boy,
Sith. He's
my
not a
boy.
Sith. You know, him and Shin Hati are not Jedi. They're not Sith. They're something else, right? And they're using the Force. They're wielding lightsabers. They're doing whatever they want with it. Ahsoka, not a Jedi, right? She left the Order. She's very adamant. I am no Jedi, right? I'm just this wandering nomad, this Ronin that's
Yeah,
doing.
absolutely.
That's I act on my own. I see good in the world. I want to help people. I can go places that the Jedi can't because their code forbids them from doing that, right? Whatever they need to do, there's a person there that subscribed to a certain belief that does that. So I hope that people in the future can just sit with stuff a bit longer before immediately reacting to something or allowing themselves to react first. And that's a very natural feeling when it's something is new. You're challenged with something, but then to sit with it and then reflect and go, oh, okay, that actually does make sense when you think about it in a larger thing, right? Did I only have this viewpoint because I watched these only the movies and that's I was all I was presented with? Then perhaps yes. But going back to 2010 when we were introduced to Night Sisters, which again was a shock to a lot of us, like, oh, there's witches in Star Wars, and now
Mhm.
we had zombies in Star Wars in a live action sense in Ahsoka last year, also influenced by witchcraft of the Night Sisters, who also talk about threads and stuff like that. This shouldn't be that too much of a shock to people, right? We had a whole new galaxy outside of Star Wars that we rode space whales on to get to, which that sentence alone is a bonkers thing. So there should be able if you accept that, like that's not where you drew the line, right? That Ahsoka
No.
can just be eaten alive in a ship with a droid and then go off into hyperspace to some unknown galaxy out in the world that were children's stories that somehow were true, where all these different creatures and beings are and all these mystical things about the Force. If you accept that, but this is where you draw the line as witches chanting in a circle, one out of two, whatever the chant was, I can't remember off the top of my head. But if that's where you draw the line, then we need to, you need to sit back and have a one-to-one conversation, in my opinion, about like what is appropriate, what isn't appropriate, and all that stuff. There, like there's a lot more bonkers stuff in Star Wars that you've accepted to this point.
Well, just the concept of Star Wars is bonkers if you think about it, like all of it. People just need to ask questions, and this is the teacher side of me coming in. Just ask questions
Ask
before you
questions.
react. Don't
Yeah,
react. Ask questions. You're within your right to be shocked, and if we don't get answers at the end of the season, I'll be asking questions like why, what's this, what's that, and you know, I I just think that's part of the process. But
yeah,
to the way some people handle, I know we talked about this off air a little bit. The way some people are handling this, I mean, it's not about Star Wars, so that's disappointing.
yep, yep.
But it is what it is. It's the world we live in, unfortunately. That's why it's fun that we've met each other and some of the people that we've done. Not everyone that's in our circle has loved everything, and we're able to have conversations
Yeah,
about it and
they're
disagree.
allowed to as well. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean that's an excellent point though. Like if you can okay with Ahsoka riding in the side of a space whale, I'll Noah like Noah, then you can't handle another coven of witches.
You can handle
Just
it. It's
because of
in
because of
coven,
your
right?
viewpoint on the world, you probably should just let it go, man. Like just let it go.
Just let it go. It's not that important. It's just a space fantasy, right?
And
It's
they
just
want
meant to be fun on a Tuesday night.
yeah, it's the thing. They keep saying it's ruining stuff, and I'm like, what has it ruined? It's building the
Exactly.
lore. It's built, and the problem is we're going back and we're retrofitting stuff into things, right? And I don't think they've done anything yet that blows up. The whole thing about this was there can't be a Sith because of what Kiadi Mundi says. right? We don't even know if this is a Sith yet. Maybe
Yeah.
that's
Just because you have a
we
red
have
lightsaber
no
doesn't mean you're a
idea.
Sith. Yeah.
Just relax. Let's finish the season, and then if we don't get season two's coming, and I'll answer more questions, then yeah, then I'll be right in there in line with like, hey, what the hell's going on here?
Yep. Yep.
Like, why haven't you done this? Where is this at? And but to be in uproar about things that you don't understand, it's okay to ask questions. It's fine not to know. That's how you learn. Like, you have to ask questions,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's that simple. And hopefully you have someone in your circle that can be like, oh well, this and this, here's this, here's a little bit of that. And if you don't, tune into other more podcasts. I listen to other podcasts. I sit there and I
That's
listen to
right.
like Force Center podcast and some other ones, a new rock stars, and like just kind of get their takes on things. Now they're mostly positive. They don't love everything.
But they come at it from the
They
same
come at it
viewpoint
from
of
different,
curiosity.
yeah, and they ask different questions than I would have thought of. And just, it's okay, folks, not to have the answers, and ask for help, and figure things out. Maybe make an intelligent decision, not just fly off the handle.
And I'll say too, to that point, it's okay to change your viewpoint as well. I think in today's media, uh,
Oh yeah, for
you're
sure.
some people believe that you're never allowed to change if you didn't like something. That's how your viewpoint is supposed to be for the rest of your life. And I was like, no,
I've
no, that's not
had
true at
this
all.
conversation since last Tuesday about this show, and it's like, if I'm wrong, I'll say I was wrong, and yeah, the show's trash. Like, that's, if this ends up doing something crazy, let's just
Mhm.
say on its offhand that they're just going to go for something that's so out of left field that it does really throw a wrench into things. And yeah, I will be like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. But the people who are yelling and screaming right now will not be willing to come around. What if this sets up something so beautifully for Anakin's story? They will not come around and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have judged so quickly. Like Luke judged Yoda. If you're
Yep.
really a Star Wars fan, you should have already learned this lesson
Yep. Great
in
warrior.
Empire Strikes Back. you know all
Yep.
those lessons are right there for you in the original trilogy, and people are like, well, I've watched the first six movies, I can quote them upside down and backwards. I'm like, well, that's great. There's been more stuff. So
Yep. Yep. And let me say, to your point there, yes, ending all of that. There in these 3 episodes so far, there is nothing introduced that diminishes or contradicts or undermines the redemption of Anakin Skywalker in Return of the Jedi as the chosen one. There's nothing introduced or even hinted at in this series that diminish any of his chosen one abilities. There's absolutely nothing. And once you check that, you know, opinion or viewpoint out of your mind, I think that you will enjoy if you go back and rewatch these through a different lens. You will be able to enjoy them in a lot in a
oh,
different headspace.
absolutely, absolutely.
And speaking of that, let's get into the next question here, which I think
All
talks about
right.
that a little bit here. It is strongly hinted that there's something to the birth of May and Osha, something that they want to keep hidden from the Jedi. And when I say they, I mean this coven of witches. Um, Mother Anasea even says that she created them. What do you think happened here? Did Mother Anasea manipulate the midichlorians to create life?
So in my head canon, which is just mine, right, you don't have to agree with it or like it, the fact that she says that they've done things that are dark and unnatural, I feel like this I think there's more to the story again. But from out of my perspective, I feel like they probably almost like the Nameless. I think they absorbed the Force from something else and created life with. Like, I don't think it's the same as the Force creating Anakin, like, on its
Sure,
own. I think that, yes, if she says she created it, that's fine. But I don't believe that it's in the same context. And I can be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll say it, and I'll be like, well, that is a little sketchy.
sure.
But um, my thought was that they've done something wrong. They've taken from someone else and created
Hmm.
something new. And I do think that there might be something unhinged about Osha and May a little bit down the line. Well, I don't think maybe they're both going to be as pure as we want them to be. But for me personally, that's how I see it. I thought, honestly, when May was like crawling through escaping the fire. Sorry, OSHA. When OSHA was crawling through that, I thought she was going to come into like some where they're going to find like bodies or something where they have like sucked the life force from
Mm.
something else. And I know that there's an episode in the Clone Wars or something like that where people were like absorbing it. I know that like, in Phase 2, the mother, she's like feeding the Nameless a little bit,
Oh
and
yeah.
that kind of stuff. But that's in my head canon. That's what I think's happened. I think that they've created by stealing the Force. Like I don't feel like they were strong enough to manipulate it, in my opinion. So
I mean, that's certainly valid. We don't know at this point, so everything
yeah,
is
I mean
pure
that's just
speculation.
pure guess.
And I like what you're going there. And if I can add a potential like side alternative theory to that, is that I just thought of as you were explaining that here. We've seen in Rise of Skywalker, Rey and Ben force heal. What if there's an alternative, like Palpatine? Like Palpatine takes some of their life energy to regenerate himself. What if there's some of that here? Like they took like the life force of somebody else, put it into a womb, right? And then that's how you birth twins, right? That could
Yeah.
be on the table. Nothing's off the table, frankly,
No, I
because they're
mean,
witches, and we've seen witches raise people from the dead.
yeah.
Once you accept that, anything is a possibility. Again, whales traveled across time and space with people in. They ate a ship and then transported them to a graveyard where these whales pass. Like anything is possible at this point, guys. Like all that's on the table, frankly. And if they did, like if they did influence midichlorians, I think people are getting up in an uproar about this because they think that whatever reason Plagueis was the first one. They think that Plagueis was the first one to discover that, even though Palpatine never says he was the first one to figure this out. If he even did, that could have been manipulation of all he was doing there in that conversation that we're hearing from Palpatine's point of view is seduction to Anakin, right? He's telling him everything that Anakin wants to hear to move Anakin from point A to point B to set him up for his ultimate, down transition to the dark side, right? Everything that was done there was deliberately chosen to be said, right? No one just sits there randomly and then says, "Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis?" Like that doesn't really happen unless you have a reasoning to do that. And nothing that is done in this episode or hinted at again contradicts what Plagueis may or may not do. Maybe Plagueis has helped them, right? This might have been his testing ground,
That's a
or
big
Plagueis's
theory.
master,
That's been a
right?
big theory I've seen. Yeah,
This
that
could be his like testing ground. Like they've been working together, and that's why the Jedi are kind of sniffing this because like we've heard rumblings about a dark side. That's why they're on Brendok, which is not supposed to be a Republic outpost or not part of the Republic, and they're just kind of investigating some dark side stuff that they overheard come across these witches, which are supposed to be hidden, right? And I know people are going to the Darth Plagueis Legends novel, which I know a lot of people still consider to be canon in some regards.
it's
But again,
a great book, but it's
what's
not
presented
canon.
in there, the fact that I think people have always had this theory in their minds that once Episode 3 came out, that in that conversation that Plagueis and Palpatine created Anakin, and they didn't directly. It was an indirect creation based off of what's in Plagueis, right? They were manipulating the Force to create life, and by going so dark, the Force then counterbalanced and created the Chosen One as a result of that. At least that's how it's described in Plagueis, right? So it's not like Plagueis and Palpatine were like, we're going to put a child in Shmi Skywalker, and that's going to be the Chosen, and like that's our new Force, dark side Force Messiah, right? In a way, right? Like that's not what happened here. So even if May and Osha are created by whatever manipulation of the Force, right, through dark side magic, unnatural magic, right? Because if they're created outside of whatever, right? I think that it only increases the speciality of Anakin in a way, right? Like if he was created of the Force by the Force to counteract the darkness that existed, right? These twins being created have no impact on that whatsoever, but they were created through someone's manipulation, and then other people throughout the line of history, whether they learn Plagueis or someone Plagueis's master learns that from Mother Anasea or another coven, right? Learns this information, or perhaps this coven's now wiped out. Somehow the Sith find out about this coven and start like researching about it, right? Just because we didn't know that Obi-Wan had a master that wasn't Master Yoda, Qui-Gon, right? That's not
Yeah.
mentioned in the original trilogy, right? And we accept that. There,
As
there's
yeah.
there's nothing that contradicts whatever is in the prequel trilogy, in the original trilogy, in the sequel trilogy. It's in this. So people getting up in an uproar that it's ruining Star Wars and all that stuff. Again, I don't think that those claims are founded in a reality that they are suggesting based off of what is presented here. And I say to the contrary again, I think Anakin's birth is more special now because of this, at least in my opinion. And I am glad that it sticks to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's this galaxy is massive. You think about the things, just say on planet Earth that we think someone did, but we find out someone else did it hundreds of years earlier. Like,
Exactly.
it's a big galaxy. Open your mind. Don't be sad. Like, it's not going to stop Anakin from doing what he's done.
It never does.
These two sisters in the end, they're not going to mean anything. Honestly, if you think about it, like, unless they're directly tied into Anakin somehow, right? Which would be cool if they were like the test dummies, like you kind of said, you know, these two sisters don't, they really won't, in the end, they won't matter as far as the greater story because they are just going to be written off eventually. I mean, this is
Yeah.
100 years before any of that stuff
What,
happens.
they're going to be 124 the Phantom
Yeah,
Menace?
and
Uh,
yeah, so like it's okay, like it's fine, even if it's exact same thing that Anakin does. Let's say they are of the Force, which we know they're not because Mother Anna say it. But let's say they are of the Force, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Like it doesn't take away from Anakin. And like,
it
how
does
do we
not
know
at
that
all.
it's what's going to happen when this Dawn of the Jedi movie comes out, or this Prime Jedi, or whatever it's called? And they have the first, what if this first person is of the Force? People are like, oh, they've ruined Anakin
Yep.
25,000 years in ahead. Just just go with it, folks. It'll be all right.
Let's just say too here, Padawan Torben at this time takes the blood
Mm,
sample of Osha, and there isn't like this immediate scene that happens afterwards where it's like she has a midichlorian count of 30,000, right? There's
yeah.
nothing like
Now
that.
that would have been a problem, I think, if they would have
Now
done
that would
something
have
very
certainly
drastic.
raised some heads, but that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
And I think that people are
no,
like, that happened. Anakin is no longer special. He's not the chosen
yeah,
one anymore because of these twins' existence.
yeah.
Like, come
That's a
on,
really good
guys.
point.
None of that happens. And I was, I'm on midichlorian watch, right? Ever since they hinted at
The
it so
M
much in the
count.
Bad Batch, they finally said it. Asajj Ventress just has a throwaway line where she says midichlorian randomly. I thought, man, Master Torben, he's got the thing that takes some blood. It's very similar to the Phantom Menace. We've got the prick right there. He says, I'm just taking a blood sample. And then she should have said right back, well, for what? Oh,
Hmm.
taking your midichlorian count, of course. I was waiting for it. And they were this
Yeah.
close to greatness and didn't say it. Come on, guys. Just say the word, you cowards.
Yeah, that word is controversial, isn't it? Like it's just the M count, M count, M count in uh Bad Batch. It kind of made me laugh every time I heard it because they were almost afraid to say it.
They
So
were, and
yeah,
it's funny how far we've come. Like now, at one point, that was the thing that people were like, "This ruined Star Wars," and now
yeah,
people are defending it. Right?
yeah.
We've come to 2 years from now, there'll be another thing that people hate. Right?
Oh
This
yeah,
ruined Star Wars. 3 years from now, there'll be another thing. This ruined Star Wars, and I'll go back. Wow, midichlorians really didn't ruin it. Wow, Reva didn't ruin it. The Acolyte didn't ruin it. It's going to keep going. There's going to be something else that people are going to be upset about. But for us fans that are willing to have good conversations about it and think critically about things, we're going to find the hidden meaning and the finer details behind it, which makes you know makes for a larger enjoyment of the saga, in my opinion.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I was a kind of like a anti prequel person when I was growing up. I didn't, I was a little bit older when I saw them. They didn't really fit for me, and I kind of was like against them, and I'd complain about them. And then I'm just listening to other podcasts and things like, why am I so angry at these? They extend the lore. I do think Clone Wars helped a ton,
Yeah, sure.
um, but they're not my favorite. One of them is my second least favorite movie, but I still appreciate it for what it is. I had to come around. I'll be perfectly honest. I wasn't like, I was a big fan of them or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, I hope that some people come around. I've had some conversations where I've dropped some knowledge on people, hopefully in a positive way. They're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Well, that's fine. Like now, let's go. people using that Amanda Stenberg's quote from a movie that was about racism
Yeah.
and acting
Hey,
like it's from this. It's a big no-no.
realities of the world again. Just
Yeah, unfortunate.
putting viewpoints on other things. Hey, the world we live in.
Yeah.
But hey, again, too, nothing that was in the prequels really
Well,
contradicted what happened or ruined what was in 4, 5, and 6.
no, and nothing. Yeah, like sequels
Again, the
building
sequel
on it,
trilogy
and
too, 7, 8, 9.
yeah,
Nothing diminishes what
everyone seems
happens
to have
before.
forgotten about Ray. I guess no one's mad about Ray Skywalker anymore. Now they're all
Yeah,
focused
now
on
it's something else.
Mayanosha. So, my
Or
goodness.
Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, right? People will
Yeah,
they'll move on. They'll find
yeah,
something else to gripe about. It is the way of the Star War.
it is. This is the
Um,
way, unfortunately.
this is the way. Yeah, even another show they turned on, right? I remember season
Yes,
3. Whoa,
yeah.
whoa now. Whoa now. People will find something to hate. It's in our nature, unfortunately. But you can fight through it. We can rise up against it. And I long for that future when you go to a celebration, right? You've been to many celebrations. There's not an ounce of hate in that building.
That is the fun place to be. You have some spirited debates. There are people like, well, that's not my Star Wars, but they do have a Star Wars, and you just kind of like, okay,
But that's
and you try
great.
to
There's a
find
Star
that.
Wars for everybody.
Yeah, and that's like, like I'm not a prequelist, but some people that's their first Star Wars. Some people's first Star Wars is going to be Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone starts the journey in a different place. And yeah, getting to watch the Rise of Skywalker trailer at Chicago, it still gives me goosebumps. Um,
Roll it again.
yeah, just being. I wasn't in the main stage, but I was out on the deck, out in the the open area. But it's just that whole place stopped. We watched it. It was just like
Yeah,
everyone was so full of hope, and it was a great atmosphere, and that's what Star Wars could be. And not everyone's going to love everything, but just work with it a little bit. And if they do things that are blatant, like you said, like, oh, May, you have 30,000 midichlorian counts. You're the most powerful
yeah.
Jedi that we'll ever see in the entire world. Then yeah, get upset. I'll be in line with you. But like, what is this? But yeah, I it has helped find more like-minded people. And the thing is, too, I don't want to be with people who all think the same, though. I want to be
Yeah,
challenged.
of course.
So I'm not saying like I just want people who think like me. Like I want to be challenged, but I want to be challenged by people who are open-minded.
But there's a
And
diplomatic way to approach things
yes,
rather
and
than
it's so frustrating. I try to teach my kids, don't be like the adults. Like, open your mind, make up your own opinion, take in all the facts. And
yep. Watch it
so
for yourself.
yes, yeah. I think some of these people haven't watched the show.
I don't think
They're
they
just
have either.
regurgitating. It's like when I hear a kid say something in my classroom, and I know for a fact it's what their parents have been saying at home.
Oh, yep.
It's like,
You can tell
oh.
verbatim.
I was like, I know that you have never thought about this situation in your entire life, but your
Mm,
parents have complained about it enough. So go watch it, form your own opinion. If you feel like it's upset you, then talk to someone about it. Don't be hateful, and you're allowed to you're allowed to question things. That's the whole point of it. But yeah, so I don't know. Um, I do think that, like you said, we'll come out on the other side of this. I think it'll be good. It's just getting through it.
it's that
It's
slog.
has
It's that
has
slog getting through it. Yep.
it's going to be a long few weeks. I think. As far as I do think, I think that some of the people will just move on. Now, some of them out there who get viewerships. That's one of the big problems too. Is two of the
The
biggest
algorithm doesn't help.
podcasts.
Yeah.
If you look at, we did this on our live show the other day. We typed in, Acolyte season 3 review, episode 3 review, and it was, theory. It was the critical drinker, and
Hmm.
it's all just super negative
These big
titles.
those thumbnails, I can already see them.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's hard to combat that. Like we're not as big as they are. I don't have 3.5 million followers. If I did, I'd still be me. I wouldn't. But
Yeah.
wow, I'm getting more followers because I'm being hateful. Um,
Yeah. The
you know,
algorithm encourages hateful discourse.
it's kind of sad,
I
honestly.
agree. It's a fault
Where
in
we're
the
at is
media
it's kind
system
of
that we're
sad that
in.
that's what sells. And that goes back. That's not just now. That's forever. But you know, I feel like the hate and some of the things that are being said and done just unwarranted, and honestly don't even know where some of it comes from. So
Yeah, they're
it
definitely
is
not in good faith. I can tell you
worrisome.
that. It is
Yeah.
worrisome. I agree. I agree. But you know what's not worrisome is the how this episode plays with vantage points and perspectives,
Oh yeah.
which I think is so awesome. I love that line that Obi-Wan says. A lot, a lot of it depends on our point of view, and Palpatine even says it too in Revenge of the Sith. I love just that concept of like, oh, from my point of view, the Jedi are evil, right?
Hmm.
uh, um, how does that influence our interpretation of the episode as a viewer, in your opinion?
Oh my goodness. I think it's key to it. I think that what I've said since is like we have to wait for the rest of the story because I believe that we've seen one vantage point.
Yeah,
We've seen Osha's. I think we're going to see May's. Um, seeing the Jedi from another perspective of, Shmi is like, yes, take my son, get him out of slavery,
yeah,
and
yeah.
take him.
Please
Yes,
take my son to a better life.
yes, like, oh, it's different when you're, these two girls. I'm sorry that they're all women raising them. I know that upsets some people.
They have full bellies. They're eating spice cream.
Yeah, they're having. I mean, they have a good life, and they're sneaking out. They're doing things. Like they're doing everything kids should do. Why would you want your kid taken? So yeah, I mean, I think this. I like you said earlier, like it is difficult to see our heroes. You saw a soul
Cast
pop
in a
up
different
behind
light.
that tree.
Yeah.
I was like, "Whoa, what's that creeper doing?" Like, what's happening here? And I think that like you said, like there's more to this story. We've got to let it play out. There's a
Yes.
reason these four Jedi are all kind of a little jacked up in the head, and one of them's
Yes.
off on another planet by himself, running around naked, as as Wookiees will do. One who has aged about 40 years,
Oh
over
my
10
gosh.
years,
Oh, that
and
airline.
and then Dara. I mean, she's just kind of cold, and then Soul is trying to overcompensate. I think by just being, you know. But yeah, I think this whole perspective thing, like that's what we need. We don't want to keep seeing it from the Jedi's perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like think about Clone Wars and Barriss Offee. Like she didn't think that the Jedi were doing the right thing. Like
No.
there's other perspectives, but we got mad at that because of what she did to Ahsoka. So we kind of lost where she was going with the story. And of course, with Tales of the Empire, she has this beautiful full circle. Just blew me away. Not what I
Yes.
wanted, but it absolutely blew me away. So for the vantage points, the perspectives, I think this is absolutely what Star Wars needs, and it is testing people. Some people are failing that test, but yeah, I think this is great, and I applaud Leslie Headland. Like I don't know what she's done in the past. I don't, till we get actual evidence of things. I
Yeah.
think she's been great for Star Wars so far. And
100%
again, if
agree.
she does something insane, I'll be there to
We'll call her
complain.
out. Yeah.
But she has just built it. She's showing us Star Wars from a different point of view. It's beautiful. So,
Yes. Yes. You're right. You are right. Like, um, it is good to be 100% challenged in the way that we conceptualize things, and these are viewpoints that many people have had for almost 50 years now, going back to what we're taught in A New Hope. So to have those concepts challenged for the first time potentially for folks after 50 years was a big, bold action undertaken by this director.
oh
Not
yeah.
director, but showrunner. She didn't direct the episode, but she was on set. She
Hmm.
she was
This
the
is
one
her
that
baby.
putting it all together. This is her thing, right? She's at the forefront of in media and in conversations about it. This when you say the Acolyte, Leslie Headland's name is right beside it, right? You can
She's the
almost put
quarterback of this team.
exactly Leslie Headland's The Acolyte. You can almost say, if
Yeah.
you didn't put Star Wars in front of it, Star Wars The Acolyte, you could put it like they will be forever intertwined together,
Yep.
1 and 2. So this is arguably, you could say, I know people will say perhaps have different perspectives on it, but this episode may be one of the biggest risks that in the Disney era they have taken, and frankly,
Oh,
of all of Star Wars, frankly, I know the episode 1 was a big gamble, but and episode 7 obviously was a big gamble too, trying to reintroduce stuff again. But maybe even November 2019, once the Mandalorian comes out, we're in this Disney Plus era. This may be the biggest swing that they've taken in terms of trying to introduce the fandom in a live action sense to some of the bolder and more out there concepts of what can and can't be included within the Star Wars galaxy, which
Oh,
I'm very proud of her for taking that step and wearing it on her sleeve and being like, this is a, I fully firmly believe everything we've done in this show lines up with what we have talked about. We worked hand in hand with the story group, right? Have full faith and confidence in what we're doing here. And I think this episode nailed everything that they were trying to accomplish, especially when it comes to thinking about vantage points and perspectives on this. Because what we see at the end there as Osha's being escorted out is not like those bodies weren't charred.
oh
Right.
no,
And as
something.
you said, these four Jedi that are being hunted by May, wouldn't have done what they've done in the last 16 years if they didn't believe otherwise.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think there's going to be a new Jedi protocol called "Witches Get Stitches" because I think that they're going to have done something. I mean, I'm assuming that a fight has broken out and
Yeah.
all hell breaks loose from another perspective because May has seen something. When her and Osha are having that conversation, she's like, "What have you done?" Like, you know, um,
The door closes and we don't see anything else. Like they're
no,
very deliberate about what we
yeah,
see in this episode.
yeah. So yeah, I again, it all comes down to letting the story develop.
Yeah.
I think binging material like Netflix has kind of ruined people from the week to week
The
storytelling
weak
aspect.
conversation, exactly.
Yes, and the water cooler talks. Like Andor suffered. Some people hate Andor the
Oh,
first time they watch it,
oh.
but they go back and they are able to watch it back to back to back, and they're like, "Oh, this is really great." I'm like, "Yeah, it's." I think it suffered from week to week because it was slow. It was a very slow
Yeah, it
burn.
was meant to be 3 story arc movies
Yeah, and
in one.
so and I think like some people they want now, in the culture we live in now, 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 now. I want it
Yep,
now.
give
I want
me,
it
give
now. I
me.
want the answers now. Yeah, give me, give me, give me. And this, what we grew up with doing, watching week to week, um, isn't jiving with some people, and they're not patient enough to let this story develop over the 7 weeks. It's the
Yeah.
7 weeks out of your life. Let it let it
Fun.
develop.
Have fun. Have fun with it.
If you have nothing to do other than complain about Star Wars, you might need
You're
to
living a
fill your
pretty
life
good
with
life right now. Let's be
yeah, I
honest. If
mean,
that's the only
what are
thing
you
you can
doing?
complain about.
So, yeah, we'll see. I definitely has to be something else. I'll be upset if there's not. If a Jedi
Yeah.
Master took his own life based on what we saw on Tuesday, I will be an enraged fan, but I won't be calling anyone names or anything like that. I'll be like, this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
upset now.
From a
So,
real world perspective, let's just say, like, our ancestors from 100 years ago that suffered through the Great Depression that were trying to
hmm.
figure out how to eat and scrap food together are looking down on us, being like, "You're complaining about a space show?"
Yes, yeah.
Like,
It
put in
is all a matter
perspective,
of
guys. We're
perspective.
living in the good times right now. We get to complain about Star Wars to some degree. So, like, this is
I mean, it didn't
a
exist when I
privilege.
was yeah, I mean, after 1983, it didn't exist for me.
The dark times.
I wasn't a big reader, as a young kid,
Yeah,
unfortunately. I wish I had been. Um, but, there was no Star Wars. It was just playing on the
wasn't.
toys and
Couple
playing games
video
when
games here and there, and then the
yeah,
re-release in '97.
yep. So, and that wasn't new. Like it wasn't new Star Wars. It was the same Star Wars, and then people complained about that.
And
So,
George Lucas ruined my childhood. I
yeah,
remember.
he ruined my childhood by making a big ring of fire come out of the Death Star. Oh,
Yep.
according to the first episode of Acolyte, there's no fire in
No
space
fire in space. Yep.
except
Never seen
for
it
all
once.
the explosions on the Executor and the Death Star multiple times, and
Yep.
so
Yep. Yep. Phantom Menace has some fire in space. I mean, again, they're picking and choosing. Picking and
yeah,
choosing. I think I saw someone complain that, like, uh, I don't remember who this was, but I heard it. Someone was mad about the word lunch being in Star Wars, right? Like, I'm taking my lunch break or something like that, or I'm going out for lunch or something like that. And they're like, that's what took you out of it.
yeah,
Come on,
that's
guys. I want to eat too. Like, lunch is okay.
I think the only thing that's taken me out of the show, that crazy witch laugh during the ceremony kind of threw me a little bit. I won't lie to you. I was like, what was that necessary? Like that was weird for me,
Hey,
but some
that's
people were like,
okay.
hey, whatever. I'm not mad about it. Like it's like, well, I didn't like it, but it didn't ruin it. I mean, but I was like, that was weird. I was like, that's kind of out of place. It seems like
Totally. I mean,
she's
and
super
they're
excited about it.
allowed to have some weird, wacky stuff in there, and you're also allowed to be like, "Hey, wasn't for me." That's totally fine. But you're also not going to be like going on the internet and going like, "How dare they had a
This is
witch
the
cackle?"
worst writing I've ever seen in my entire life because that witch cackled oddly.
Yes,
This isn't the
yes.
Wizard of
How dare
Oz.
they?
Yeah,
Star Wars is ruined. Leslie Headland ruined Star Wars. How
yeah.
dare they?
Oh,
Um, but
goodness.
wow, wow. Well, we've come on a full journey here, Jimmy, and I'm at my last question here.
All right.
And we only got to see Osha's perspective in this matter, on what happened on Brendock. But it looks like, as we've kind of alluded to, there's more to this story than just May, quote unquote, set everything on fire. Um, do you think we'll? I think I know your answer to this already based on how our conversations went. But will we see this from other perspectives and viewpoints in the later episodes?
I think we have to.
Yeah, I think so too.
Like, I mean, I think we have to. If not, then some of the people's complaints might be valid with the writing and things like that. If we don't see, I just don't know how this could be. Like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I just don't see how something else happened. I mean, it had to. Like, I, I'll fall on that sword right now. Something else had to have happened. Episode 4 or 5, I think probably 5, because I think 4 is going to come back to now, and I think that's going to deal with
Yeah,
Kalnaka. And so this, because usually the way they show
gotta flip back and forth. Yeah.
trailers, it's usually the first 4 episodes or so. So I feel like we're going to get caught up, and then we'll get another episode,
Hmm.
or we'll believe something for a little bit, and then we'll see it a different perspective, and it's going to blow everybody's
Yeah.
minds.
Yeah.
But yeah, they have to. I think. I mean, they don't have to, but they have to. They can do whatever they want, but they have to.
I think there'll be too many outstanding questions,
Yo,
right?
yeah.
Which
I mean,
first and foremost for me is like the I get why May is upset, right? I
yes.
kind of can piece together, but I want to see the motive behind her crusade, right? She has to know a lot more about those specific 4 Jedi based off of what happened in this, and in those minutes that we don't see what she's doing versus what Osha's doing. And then, we see Osha and May come together on that bridge. Soul comes in between them. He's only able to save Osha in that fall as the bridge collapses. Um, there's more to May's side of this that I'm more intrigued about than
Oh,
anything. And perhaps there's the Jedi perspective, the witch's perspective as well.
you could
Something
have a
happened to
whole
them because, again,
season
like I
on the
said, they're not charred on
perspectives.
fire. So that answer is
Yeah.
is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, you could have a whole season on the different perspectives of this. Something that May says to Ndara is, she's like, "We don't attack unarmed," and she goes, "Yes, you do."
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
she's seen something, and I'm assuming that. I mean, I think maybe it got a little twisted because she was young, but I do think there's a big fight about to happen or
Sure.
something like that. Um, and also, too, the guy that's crazy, that crazy prisoner, he senses the darkness in Osha. So
Hmm.
there's more to this story, and if you just pick up on these little nuances, it's going to be developed. And but yeah, I cannot see, like you said, like there would be so many questions. Like she'd be the new J.J. Abrams of just
Yep. It would just
the
be
mystery
mystery
box,
box.
like just mystery boxing it. Here's an idea. I won't have to deal with it for season 2. You will. But yeah, I think that, and I think it'll be important. I think something, we move on. Like if Kalnaka, whatever happens with him, or we're going to meet. Is it going to be that Acolyte scene where we've seen some different things with like the I call him Zipper Face. The Knight of Ren wannabe.
Yeah.
Um, on that planet, which looks like where Kalnaka's at. So we'll
Hmm.
see. Maybe we're like, oh, okay, the Jedi are good, and they're going to lull us back to sleep. Then they're going to slam us with May's perspective. We're going to be like, oh no, like what has happened to my heroes or something like that. Because again, I know I keep saying this, but something more has to happen to have Master Torben do what he did, because
Yes.
Disney doesn't take that lightly either. Because if you've read some of the books, The Rise of the Red Blades, there's a big thing at the beginning of it because some of the characters take their own lives, and they have a big
Mm,
excerpt in there about like, hey, no, we take this seriously. This is a choice we made in the story. We don't condone it. I was kind of surprised that there wasn't a um, disclaimer
Sure.
at the beginning of
Yeah.
this episode. This is the way that Disney's been handling things because it is a problem in society with people taking not
Absolutely.
getting the help they need and stuff like that. I was kind of more surprised by the fact that Disney didn't have a disclaimer than
I think so too,
um,
frankly. Yeah.
so. Maybe that's just me working with kids and being concerned about them, but um, yeah. So
He certainly feels guilt enough to a point to do something like that.
yeah, and if just taking the kids. I mean, that's what the Jedi do. They take kids. I mean, it. You say it out loud, it sounds pretty terrible.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
but
Exactly. Plus a lot of death, potential cover up.
yeah, I do think that like we've both said throughout this entire time is the Jedi are not perfect. They're gonna make mistakes,
Yes.
and every trilogy we've seen mistakes made. We've seen mistakes made in the books. We've seen mistakes made in the animation. Like Jedi are not perfect. They cause their own problems sometimes, and they have to deal with them. Just like I don't want to say humans because obviously they're not all humans. But sentient beings have to deal with this and rationalize the things that they've
100%.
done. And if your whole life is wrapped around doing the right thing and you do the wrong thing, that's going to mess with you
It's hard to
real
forgive
bad,
yourself. Yeah.
you know? So, yeah.
All true on all these fronts. And I agree with you. I think that we have to see more, right? We know the inspiration for this is the Kurosawa film, that will showcase different vantage points. I think that's going to be pivotal for those that want to enjoy this series to have that in their back of their minds. Like this isn't the closed book on what happens in this event, right? I think you should expect to see more of this. Um, and I will throw the theory in there that I've heard online because I know people have been very good at sleuthing. Who's I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head. Is it Kilnar? The other mother, not
Oh,
Mother
Coral.
Anastasia.
Coral?
Coral? Okay.
Yeah. I think I
Um,
have that written down right here.
someone did a very good
Yeah, Coral.
analysis of the bodies that are laid about, of the witches as May or Osha is going through. She's being escorted by Soul. Uh, from what they can tell, what's presented on screen, which I think is very deliberate, they cannot find her body amongst those that are dead.
Oh, man. And she's
So,
not
and I
with
know she was
Anastasia
the
for
one.
sure.
She was the one saying we need to have a stronger
Oh,
fist. We
man.
have different viewpoints, right? Perhaps she starts this fight with Anastasia, right? Like we need to protect her coven. They get to a bash. Stuff happens
Yeah,
from
because,
there. The Jedi get involved to some degree. We saw Torben get taken over. Maybe that's all. Again, there's a lot more at play potentially.
I'm going to
Speculation
go
is
watch that
good,
again.
but again, there might be hidden details there that could lead to a larger
Oh, wow.
thing
That's
at
a
play
great.
here. And I saw some people speculating maybe she's the one in the helmet, right?
Oh,
Again, I'm not saying it's a definite, but it's a possibility
yeah.
that this event could spark many things, and that could
Uh-huh.
be some of the catalysts that we weren't seeing behind the scenes. There
Wow.
is that two mother relationship coming to a head.
Wow. Yeah. That's an excellent point. Now I'm going to have to go back and
Say just some
take a
food for
look at
thought.
those
Yeah,
scenes. Yeah,
another
because that would
another.
make sense too, because those two kind of butted heads right off the bat
Yep,
with Spice Cream, and then she's like, they need to be more disciplined. They need to do this. We're going to fight the
exactly.
Jedi, and I mean, she was definitely the yin to Mother Anastasia's yang. So, um, yeah, I could. That's an excellent point. I would, you know, and what we've seen of Zabrak, we know they can be feisty.
That's right.
So
That's
I
right.
think she was a Zabrak. I'm not sure, but
Yes.
she looked
Yep.
like one. But yeah. So, oh man, yeah. I know what I'm doing as soon as we're done here.
See, everybody, I implore you all, go rewatch this episode again. Maybe you'll see it through a different lens with that
Yeah,
prism of
great.
maybe that relationship isn't as strong as it's presented, or at least in the first viewing on screen. And again, this showcases that there is obviously more to this event than just the one perspective we've got. And now that we're not seeing a slash in the title, I think that also indicates
Oh, for
that,
sure.
I wonder what May's perspective episode could be,
That's
right?
yeah. I was just gonna say, like, what's the opposite of
What's the
destiny? I
opposite of
guess.
destiny?
Yeah,
Fate?
yeah. Something.
Not fate, but I guess uh
Let me see if I can. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Circumstance? I don't know. They wouldn't name something circumstance though. That's not as appealing of a title as like lost, found, and
Opposite of a divine or supernatural force, choice, freedom, free will.
Hmm.
Maybe it's, yeah, I don't know. That was the first thing that popped up. I just,
Hmm.
yeah, that's a great point. That'd be a good Vegas bet. What's the
It would
title going
be.
to
It
be
would be.
for May's episode, May's Vantage Point? So that's great. I love that. I love that a lot, actually. 'Cause when I saw that, I was like, okay, this is different. Right off the bat, you knew it was going to
Yep.
be different. So, um, yeah, that's great. Really good. Those are some
Play,
things we got to think about.
absolutely. Place your bets now, everybody. Let us know
Yeah.
what you think the next episode or what May's perspective could be of this event here. Um, well, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on to chat about episode 3, Destiny of the Acolyte. Do you have any final thoughts on the episode before
Oh,
we close up?
loved it. Loved it. I wish people would listen to your podcast, maybe learn something, um, ask questions. But yeah, I love where it's going. Again, it's not perfect. There are little things here and there, but man, it's really good. Really enjoying it. I'm excited for next week. Um, I can't say enough good things about it. Now I've got to go rewatch it and look at that scene and see where Coral's at. Mother Coral is, because that just got my head spinning. But yeah, I
Hey.
loved it. I loved being able to chat with you a lot longer than we had planned, but
That's
good
always a good thing.
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah, good conversation. So yeah, I loved it. Best
absolutely.
best episode in my opinion. I know I love the fighting and things like that, but this storytelling, setting up what's happening next, I think this was
Yeah.
key to the series. So
Foundational.
yeah,
Foundational. Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Jimmy, where can the folks find you and explore the force if they
All
want to
right.
listen to your other your conversation about this episode, previous episodes, and episodes in the future about the Acolyte?
Yeah, so you can find me and Jack at Explore the Force. We're on all social medias. We don't know necessarily how to use them all, but we're on all of them. Um,
Ain't that the truth?
yeah, oh my gosh. I can't believe I have a TikTok at my age, but you can find us there. We do weekly episodes that come out on Tuesdays, and they can be about anything. We do an immediate reaction to the episode Tuesday nights. So,
Mhm.
like, as soon as it's done, we hop on and we talk. And sometimes those are a little sporadic because we're like just dealing with all the emotions. And
Sure.
then sometimes on Thursdays we'll do a live show where we talk. We kind of sift through how everyone's feeling, and we take a lot of the stuff people are saying online and we kind of debunk it,
Yeah.
or we add to it if we think it has merit. But yeah, all the social medias, check us out, give us a like and a follow. um, and then hopefully you'll hear Anthony on our show once I finally get to watch
Hey.
the second half of Rebel Moon, so we can dive into that. Because just like that, that's what when we had you come on, Taylor and I were going to shred that show up one side and down the other. And your enthusiasm and your ability to teach us different things about that, like, and you really did. Like, you told us so much that we didn't know, which I think is that's the front of the podcast. But that's what I'm asking other people to do, is
Hey.
learn from somebody that knows more than you. It's
That's
you
what we're here
know,
for. We're here to
yeah.
help each other and just have good
So
conversation about stuff. And I hope that you do get a chance to check out part 2, the Scar Giver. We actually haven't got a chance on this at this point yet to talk about it on the podcast. Of course, Bad Batch and then Phantom Menace. And yeah,
unpacked,
there's just so
man.
much, so much, and I don't
Unpacked.
want to
Yeah.
over inundate people with 1,000 episodes. Um, so we'll get to it eventually. And of course, they announced August 2nd. Both director's cuts come out on Netflix. So if
Okay.
I implore you to perhaps watch the PG-13 version and then see the full
There
director's versions as well after that, just so you can compare and contrast which one
we
you
go.
maybe liked more, didn't like more, you liked how they presented in this way
Yeah.
versus the other way. Because frankly, they're different. They're not the same movies. They're actually, if you're expecting to see the same movie with just longer scenes, it's not going to be that. Uh, Scenes are rewritten for the rated R sequences, right? The action sequences are different. Full plot lines are different, right? They actually have different titles for the director's cut. It's not like
Wow.
Child of Fire director's cut. No, it's something like Curse of the Chalice Blood or something. It's something completely different. Unfortunately, I
All
don't know
right.
off the top of
Wow,
my head
that's
what the titles are,
yeah,
but
no, that sounds great.
um, for a viewing experience, it's going to be really interesting to compare and contrast. What worked, what didn't work. Maybe you love one, you hate the other. Who knows? All is on the table, frankly. But yeah, anytime. Love to be on. It's great chatting
Yeah.
with you, of course.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the listener at home, thank you for joining us on this incredible walkthrough of the Acolyte Episode 3 Destiny. Hope that you've been enjoying our Acolyte coverage so far. Of course, we'll be back next week with a brand new episode talking about Episode 4, whatever that title may be. So get ready for that as we face whatever may come next. Who knows? Maybe we'll get May's perspective. Maybe we'll get Kelnaka's perspective. Who knows? Sky's the limit when it comes to Star Wars and the Acolyte. So I hope you join us for this incredible ride. Of course, if you want to continue the conversation, we're on all social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. Just search Force Ghost Conversations, and we'll be there in some capacity. And until our next episode, may the Force be with you, and take care.